Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. You see them there in the sky yet again. We follow those continued reports of unmanned aircraft sightings all across the eastern part of the United States. Now, President Joe Biden gave his first public remarks on the matter, saying there's really nothing alarming about this. Listen.
Nothing nefarious, apparently, but they're checking it all out. I think it's just one. There's a lot of drones authorized up there. I think one started and they all got it. Everybody's wanting to get in the deal. But we're following it closely. So far, no sense of the danger.
So let's bring in CBS News national investigative correspondent Tom Hansen. All right, welcome, friend. President-elect Donald Trump, on the other hand, says the military knows what the drones are. Mr. Biden, though, doesn't seem to have that ominous tone. So how do we square that, and what do you know today?
Yeah, well, I think both of those things can be true. I think both sides are saying that the military does, in fact, have an idea or, the semblance of an idea of where these drones are coming from. We had a joint statement that came out from the FAA, the FBI, the DHS, the Pentagon, saying that a lot of these sightings are actually manned aircrafts or other things that are floating in the sky that are perfectly non-threatening and perfectly mundane. They said there was nothing anomalous coming out of their reports. Now, we do know that they have deployed drone busters technology. That's the sophisticated software that they were launching to assist New York and New Jersey in investigating this. Also, trained personnel who can spot drones and analyze their movements and things like that. But still, all of that coming out has not been satisfactory for so many people in the public and a lot of municipal law enforcement out there who are still in the gray territory when it comes to the facts on this matter. Some of the facts that we do know, Reed, 1 million registered drones currently in possession for some civilians, some commercial. 400,000 of those are commercial. Another 400,000 are recreational. So there are a lot of things hovering around in the sky. And I can tell you from going out with law enforcement myself, one law enforcement in Seaside Heights, New Jersey, they were launching drones up into the sky themselves to see if they could capture any clear images of these mysterious objects floating in the sky. It's very difficult to distinguish what's a plane, what's a star, what could be a drone. A lot of these flight paths are along these heavily traveled air routes. So you're seeing a lot of different objects in the sky at any given time. And if it's at night, everyone's vision is not as good at night. So there's a lot that can be explained away, but still a lot of answers. Lawmakers in a closed door meeting yesterday were briefed, and they came away after about 90 minutes saying, sure, we were told that these things are not posing a threat to the communities, but show us the data. So a lot of calls from Washington and throughout the Northeast for more raw data to really answer and, put some of these concerns to bed. Really?
Yeah, and speaking of the raw data, I'm just astounded by the numbers that you report, the numbers of drones that are in the skies. So many out there, and it makes you wonder if we aren't teeing up a more regulatory type conversation in the months and years ahead. So the FBI, they say they received more than 5,000 tips in just the last week about those drone sightings in New Jersey and many other states. So how many of those tips actually turn into leads that police can chase?
Yeah, well, of those tips, I can tell you the number of leads is significantly smaller. The White House coming out saying that there were roughly 100 leads that they were following, and you mentioned those 5,000 tips. That's because a lot of those tips, they may be reporting the same thing. So we have to take that into consideration when we're reporting out just how many reports are coming out of these mysterious objects in the sky. It could be one hovering drone and about 100 phone calls to local law enforcement. Right. So, there is something to be said for the fact that, a lot of people are starting to look up. There could be a little bit of hysteria there. There could be a little bit of paranoia that compels people to call and report perfectly normal things like a commercial plane flying overhead that, is just off in the distance, looking like a flickering light hovering about. So, those are the things that law enforcement is sifting through. We went along with one other police force, or a sheriff's department, I should say, who was putting together a heat map. And one of the things that they made very clear was in Monmouth County, which is where we were, we saw that there was a lot of areas of the county that were lighting up from these reports. But the sheriff told us that, that really didn't yield much in the form of tangible leads tracking true mysterious drones. A lot of those were manned aircrafts, they were helicopters, some even reporting from distant stars that, were flickering off in the distance. So, it really still is anybody's guess. But once again, a lot of people are still looking for more concrete evidence that this is not a legitimate concern or some kind of, foreign invasion or an alien invasion. The theories out there circulating on social media range all across the board when it comes to what these mysterious drones could be. But one thing that everyone is circling back to, show us the data.
Show us the data. And you know what? All of these reports of drone sightings and Tom Hansen, I'm yet to hear of one delivering a pizza. Maybe you'll have that next time I talk to you, my friend. You have a great day. Thank you so much. It's always great to know that you're down there with law enforcement in communities where it matters. Tom Hansen, thank you.
Good to see you.
Can you comment on the drones that are flying around New Jersey ports? It seems like the American people have a big disconnect.
The government knows what is happening. Look, our military knows where they took off from. If it's a garage, they can go right into that garage. They know where it came from and where it went. And for some reason, they don't want to comment. And I think they'd be better off saying what it is. Our military knows and our president knows. And for some reason, they want to keep people in suspense. I can't imagine it's the enemy, because if it was the enemy, they'd blast it out. Even if they were late, they'd blast it. Something strange is going on. For some reason, they don't want to tell the people. And they should, because the people are really, they happen to be over Bedminster. Want to know the truth. They're very close to Bedminster. I think maybe I won't spend the weekend in Bedminster. I've decided to cancel my trip.
Have you received an intelligence briefing on the drones?
I don't want to comment on that.
And with that, take your questions. Go to AP. Tara.
Thanks, General Ryder. So back to the drones. Can you unequivocally say that none of the drones that are being spotted are DoD assets or something that's being tested within the Defense Department? Are all of these either civilian or otherwise, but just not Department of Defense drones?
You're talking about the drones in New Jersey up and down the... Yes, they are not DoD assets.
None of them are?
To my knowledge, none of them are.
Okay. And are there any sort of experimental programs going on where maybe drones are being tested that...
To my knowledge, no.
Okay. What about the ones that are flying over military bases at this point? Have there been any possibilities of collecting what sort of information these drones are doing or anything like that?
Yeah, again, just to kind of put this into context, and I know that our colleagues at the White House, FAA, DHS, FBI have all made this point. So over 1 million drones registered in the United States, and on any given day, approximately 8,500 drones are in flight. And so the vast majority of these drones are going to probably be recreational or hobbyist. They're going to be commercial drones, used in things like architecture, engineering, farming, or they could be used for law enforcement. Is it possible that some of those drones could be up to malign activity? It's entirely possible, but the vast majority, that is not the case. And in the case of drones flying near or over U.S. military installations, that in and of itself, just given the volume of drone flights we see on a given day, is not something that's new. We take all of those seriously. We will typically, when we detect them, attempt to classify them and take appropriate measures. Is it possible that some of those are surveilling? Absolutely. But can you make that assumption in every case? Not necessarily. So in each case, commanders have the authority, installation commanders and authorities have the authority to respond appropriately, and will continue to do that.
Pat, last year, U.S. Transcom and U.S. Air Mobility Command signed an agreement with a group called the National Aerospace Research and Technology Park This is in Atlantic County, New Jersey. And the agreement was to create a test and evaluation corridor for UASs, unmanned aerial systems, and advanced air mobility. Is it possible that these drones that are being seen in New Jersey are part of that corridor that was created a year ago to test these kind of drones and unmanned systems?
Yeah, and I know you're not going to be surprised by this, but I've had some of your other colleagues reference that press release. I did check with the Joint Staff to see if that was possible, and again received confirmation: no military operations, no military drone or experiment operations in this corridor.
On drones for a second, what was the thinking behind sending additional detect and track systems to Picatinny Arsenal and Naval Weapons Station Earl? And are there other facilities that might get more of these systems in the future?
Yeah, so a couple things. So first of all, again, a lot of focus on this right now for all the obvious reasons, some of which includes those sitting in this room here. And so we're going to take this seriously. And so ensuring that installations, in this case Picatinny and Earl, have the capabilities they need to detect, to identify and track as appropriate in the event there's drone activity near those facilities. To your other question, this is exactly what the counter unmanned systems strategy that DoD put out recently talks about, is looking at what are those priority installations, what are the trends when it comes to unmanned systems or unmanned aerial systems as well, and what does the DoD need to be doing in order to address that issue, particularly when it poses a potential threat to our personnel or installations. The thing is that I think we've all recognized the fact that unmanned systems are here to stay. They're a part of modern warfare, and whether it's here in the homeland or overseas, we want to make sure that we're doing due diligence to protect our forces and protect our equities from a national security standpoint. So, I think you'll see us continuing to look at that, and it's something we're going to continue to take seriously.
What systems are being sent and when will they arrive?
In addition to some of the capabilities that are already on these installations, these capabilities essentially will enhance space authorities' ability to detect, identify, track UASs. So, for example, this could include active or passive detection capabilities, plus capabilities like the system known as drone busters, which, as you know, employs non-kinetic means to interrupt drone signals, affect their ability to operate. Right, Kelly?
You mentioned that it wasn't all that unusual to see some drones over military bases. You mentioned this is becoming more and more of a common occurrence in the use of drones. But what would constitute it as a threat? What is the benchmark, and have you been communicating with other military installations to be ready for more of these drones, and how to spot if it could be a threat before it might be too late?
Yeah. Again, it won't surprise you. This is not a new conversation for us within DoD. I mean, as I highlighted, drones flying, whether here or overseas, is not something new, right? And especially in the United States with 1 million registered drones and 8,500 flying on any given day. Similar to vehicles that may inadvertently approach a base, the same can be true for drones. As to what constitute a threat, that obviously has to be assessed on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the drone is doing, where it's going, and so I'm not going to provide a blanket definition, but again, the idea here is that by providing training, capabilities, resources, commanders are able to assess and make those determinations. The other thing that I think it's very important to remember is that when we're here in the homeland, the authorities that the U.S. military has to detect and track these kinds of things is much different than it would be if we were in a combat zone. In other words, the intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities that we can employ outside the United States are much different for very good reasons. We don't collect intelligence on American citizens. And so that, of course, appropriately requires to work very closely with local, state, and federal authorities, law enforcement authorities, when necessary to address these threats.
And you mentioned the White House and the administration did share a bit of their assessment of what these drones are. But we know lawmakers are being briefed on Capitol Hill, and members of the public, this isn't really, sitting well with them. They aren't really kind of taking this explanation for those that really saw these drones with their own eyes. So what would you say to them?
Well, again, I definitely don't want to minimize the significant interest and the concern that people have. But again, I think in the way that you now have this modern technology and the ability, you could go out of here right after this briefing and go and buy a drone, and you could fly it around your neighborhood, and as long as you're flying it appropriately and not in restricted airspace, there's nothing illegal about flying that drone. So again, just providing some perspective here, and I think the joint statement that we put out highlighted that the assessment in terms of what these reported sightings could be in terms of a combination of lawful commercial drones, hobbyist drones, law enforcement drones, as well as manned fixed-wing aircraft. Again, don't want to minimize it, but I think it's important to understand too just the volume of drone activity that will likely only increase into the future, and the fact that it is legal to fly drones, and if they go into restricted airspace, of course, we'll take appropriate action.
Just why does it have to be a classified briefing if these are just hobbyist drones, they're not military drones? Why is it a classified briefing on the Capitol Hill?
I'd have to refer you to Congress on that. Again, sharing as much information as we can here. I don't have the briefing in front of me, so I can't tell you specifically, what aspects are classified or not. I can assure you, though, that again, we are sharing as much information as we can based on what we know. Let me go to the other side of the room here, Chris.
Thanks, Pat. Two questions on drones. One, there's particular interest, perhaps by us, but also from the U.S. government regarding the drones in New Jersey. Does the Pentagon have any indications that those drones in New Jersey are somehow different in size, activity, etc., than the drones that have been spotted at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Hill Air Force Base, and other locations in the past few days?
Chris, what I would tell you is we don't see a connection at this point between any of those activities. Again, just taking a step back here, 8,500 drone flights a day, but again, don't see a connection at this stage.
And then my second question, has the Pentagon determined who was responsible for the drone incursions over the bases in the UK over the past last?
Yeah, to my knowledge, still being looked at. I'd have to refer you to the UK MOD and U.S. Air Forces in Europe.
Thank you. Have any of the drone sightings been accompanied with sightings of a large rectangular black object, sometimes called a monolith, often accompanied by Also sprach Zarathustra by Richard Strauss?
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I would probably have to think back to the words of a very wise prophet, Obi-Wan Kenobi, who said, "These aren't the drones you're looking for." But beyond that, I'll just have to move along. Okay. Let me go to Howard Altman, Warzone.
Thanks. Well, that was hard to top. I got two questions, one on the drones and one on Syria. I know you told Chris that these are not seeing, you're not seeing any connections, but in terms of visual or sensor data that is of the drones that have been seen over the U.S. bases, both CONUS and no CONUS, what similarities are you seeing in visual and sensor data?
Yeah, thanks, Howard. On your first question, I'm not going to have any information to provide in terms of sensor data, other than, again, as I highlighted earlier, we are employing a variety of both passive and active sensors in order to detect as it pertains to DoD installations. And of course, we're not the only ones in this business when it comes to U.S. civil airspace. I'd certainly refer you to DHS and FAA on that front. Last question, Mike.
I know you're hoping for a drone question, so let me oblige you.
Okay.
You say that there are these sightings. Why do most of the sightings seem to be around New Jersey? I mean, it's the Garden State and all, but what is so special about New Jersey that it's getting most of the attention from this? I've never seen drones here. I've never seen them flying around Virginia. And Second question, drone-related question. I know we are building on you're developing the military's ability to detect drones. Are you also working on their ability to defeat drones in the air?
Yeah, absolutely. To answer your last question, and I would encourage you to go take a look at the counter unmanned strategy that we put out, just last week, that talks about the approach that we're going to take. And that includes the ability to defeat drones both kinetically and non-kinetically. And so, again, looking at places like Ukraine, we've seen the impact that drones can have on the battlefield, and so it's something that the department's taking very seriously. As for your question in terms of the preponderance of sightings, reported sightings in the New Jersey Northeast corridor, I can't answer that question, Mike. Again, personal experience, I have seen drones in D.C. I've seen drones, personal drones flying around. And as I've mentioned from this podium before, one of my close relatives is a private drone operator. And I'm sure some of that person's neighbors have often wondered, what that drone is doing. So, without taking a holistic snapshot of every single privately operated drone across the United States, some of which can be that big, some of which can be that big, it's hard to know specifically, why at this point in time. And again, as was highlighted in the joint statement, the current assessment explains what we think most of those are, to include piloted manned aircraft. The last thing I would say on it, again, completely understand the concerns, completely, will reinforce we're taking this seriously. It's sometimes when you focus on something, suddenly you notice more. And so, there's always the potential that because of the heightened awareness, now we're just more aware of this particular issue. But again, we'll continue to take this very seriously. We'll continue to take appropriate action if and when it's deemed that any of these drones near U.S. military installations pose a threat. But in the meantime, again, I think it's been very clear that we've not identified that any of these reported drone sightings were assessed as anomalous, or that it presented a national security or public safety risk over civilian airspace in New Jersey or other states in the Northeast. All right.
This is part of this testing corridor between Dover Air Force Base and Joint Base McGuire.
Yes. Thank you. All right.
Can I ask you a follow-up? I apologize. It's based off his question.
Now, you just came in the briefing room, so.
Negative. I came in.
You flew in on your drone?
But thank you.
That's okay.
Normally my pattern, but you talked about the military bases. Has there been a surge in counter detection equipment that has been sent to military bases? I'm aware that DHS has sent other equipment to the New Jersey area. Is any of that include DoD equipment, or is that strictly all DHS?
As I highlighted earlier, for Picatinny, we did send some additional active and passive detection capabilities, as well as some counter-drone capabilities. Those are the only ones, and Earl, those are the only ones I'm tracking right now. But again, if we need to look at other installations, we certainly can, but I don't have anything else to.
When you say active and passive, I mean, that is just strictly detection, or is that actually to bring drones down?
So active and passive detection, different methods to be able to detect drones using different capabilities, right? So passive measures would essentially be, it just has the ability to receive signals without emitting signals. Whereas active would be like radar. I bounce the signal off and it bounces back, right? And then separate from that would be counter UAS capabilities, things like let me make sure I get the name right here, like drone busters, which essentially emits a signal which is able to interrupt the signal on the drone, which can affect its flight. So that's a methodology that we have that is able to essentially bring drones down non-kinetically should we need to do that.
Anything in the DHS equipment similar to this, or is that?
I mean, I'd refer you to them, but short answer is yes. Okay. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
We begin with Congressman Mike Waltz of Florida, who is the incoming White House National Security Advisor. Good morning to you.
Hey, morning, Margaret. Tough day for Army, but great day for America.
Indeed. Well, as a Green Beret, I know you had a reason to be cheering there for Army, sir. I want to ask you a number of topics, but before I go overseas, you sit on the House Intelligence Committee. You also, because of your new role, are in contact with President Biden's National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan. Do you think the public should be concerned about these reported drones all over the East Coast? And have you the need for more authority to deal with them?
Well, I think what the drone issue points out are kind of gaps in our agencies, gaps in our authorities between the Department of Homeland Security, local law enforcement, the Defense Department. I think Americans are finding it hard to believe. We can't figure out where these are coming from. And I can tell you from the Defense Department standpoint, they're focused on bombers and cruise missiles, and it's pointing to gaps in our capabilities and our ability to clamp down on what's going on here. And we need to get to the bottom of it. And I think the Biden administration is working to do that.
But at this point, given the intelligence you've seen, is there any reason for the public to be worried?
Well, look, when you have sensitive sites like Picatinny Arsenal, you have, of course, President Trump's residence at Bedminster, and you have other no-fly areas, those need to be enforced. We need to know who's behind it. But right now, I think law enforcement seems to be the Department of Homeland Security and the Defense Department are kind of all doing this and pointing at each other. So when we come in, how do we enforce these low-level, long loitering, could be dangerous drones? And one thing for people to appreciate, they're evolving so rapidly. It's not necessarily somebody that's just on the other end flying it. They could be following pre-positioned GPS coordinates. They could be coming from offshore. And we need to take a hard look at our homeland defenses. President Trump has talked about an Iron Dome for America. That needs to include drones as well, not just adversarial actions like hypersonic missiles. We need to have an all-of-the-above protection of U.S. airspace.
And we're joined now by Minnesota Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar. Good to have you here.
Great to be back on, Margaret. Thanks.
Well, Senator, I do want to ask you about these drones on the East Coast because we looked at your record and you actually co-sponsored legislation a few years ago trying to expand authorities to deal with them. Why do you need an act of Congress to deal with this, and why didn't the Democrats move on it?
Well, first of all, the administration has repeatedly assured people that they are safe. However, one, we need a briefing for the members of the Senate to figure out what's going on here. Two, we need more transparency. And three, I appreciated some of the congressman's words because what he was talking about is we need to have a new regulatory rules in place here. Right now, you have to register a drone if it's over a ½ pound, and there are penalties if you don't do that. Well, I think we have to make sure that regime is enforced with local and state authorities. And then we've got to figure out, do we really want all these drones? Because while these may be safe, who knows what happens in the future? And they have to be within 400 feet. So these things are going to be, flying over people's family picnics and over their homes and over beaches. Like, this is not going to be a good future if we see too many of these. So I think I was pleased that he said he wanted to move forward on some rules and finding a way to regulate these in a better way, because this just can't be, no one knows why this huge drone is right over their house.
So you might bring this up in the new Republican-controlled Senate?
Yes.